Hey everybody, Red Mage here. Welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while, but I've been doing a lot of stuff and getting all my ducks in a row. And today I wanted to release something that I've been working on for a little bit, which is a follow-up to my Ultimate OSR Region. Now, it's not just an update to the surface, which I did, and there's a few extra adventures here, but I've already posted that, and I posted that to the Dropbox. You guys can already get this. This is the... Basically, I just added a bunch of classic adventures. I added the Gates of Firestorm Peak over here, which is an excellent adventure. At some point, I'll do a deep dive on it because it's really, really good. Classic AD&D adventure. And then I added things like the Village of Hamlet, and I added the In Search of the Unknown, and I added Against the Cult of the Reptile God, Keep on the Borderlands, and then I also added a section from the first Shadowdark set, the Shadowdark Arcane Library the Gloamwood. I forget what it's called exactly, but it's from the first set of Curse Scrolls zines. So I added that over there in the corner as well. That's basically all I did to the base map, but that's not what this video is about. This video is about the Underdark. That's what I did. I added an entire Underdark map to the Dropbox. The same thing, all the files are there, and I added a whole bunch of Underdark adventures, and I glued them all together into one region. Now this one's, in a way, I don't think it's as good as the first one. There's just a lot less on here. Overall, there's about the same number of locations, but many of them come from the same adventures. And it's also harder to connect Underdark adventures because of the way that they run. The surface has a lot more, I would say, homogeneity to it, or rather there's distinct zones and regions with adventures that are of the same type. I tried to do some of that down here, it's just a little harder. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think it works out really well. There's a few duplicates from down here to the surface. So for example, the Gates of Firestorm Peak are also down here, and they're over here. And that's because, I'm going to minimize that. In the Gates of Firestorm Peak adventure, I'm just going to scroll down really quickly down to the map at the back. The book is sort of divided, all the maps are divided up into quadrants, so it'll be a little hard to see easily, but I'll get down to it. If you go all the way down to the map of the dungeon, there is access through room 16. This is the long road, or the less used road, or something like that. Anyway, it leads down into the Underdeeps, as they're called here. And lots of travel comes up and down because in this adventure there is a market for Underdark creatures. And so I wanted something like that, and it makes sense then that there's the surface dungeon and then you go down to the market, and it's sort of a crossroads. So there's no crossroads on here, but I imagine if you go, just down here as a ways, you'll get to a crossroads. And so that makes sense where the Gates of Firestorm Peak is sort of a hub, and you can see that it connects to distinct zones. It's one of the few passages east-west across this map. There's only 3 access points. One is at the bottom, one's in the middle, and one's at the top. And so it makes sense that all of this stuff on the west and all the stuff on the east would be connected through this. This is a very difficult path, and this is very far down with not a lot going on down there. So this is the path that a lot of people take to cross, and so there's a market there. And so it connects all of these tunnels. Now, you'll notice a couple things about this map. First of all, there's a lot of empty space up here and down here, and that's because I really didn't have... I don't have all that many Underdark adventures. I have enough to, I think, make this map worthwhile, but I'm sure there's tons more that I'm not aware of, and there's tons of space for you to add your own. Tons more, and there's tons of little extra tunnels, and it's easy to add connection points, and you can add your own adventures fairly easily. Now, one thing about this map, the lightest gray is obviously, the idea was that it's closest to the surface, and then there's the mid gray, which is sort of like the middle dark, and then there's the deep dark, which is the darkest gray. And I think that's a nice way of distinguishing the very, very deep parts of this map from other parts. And so I thought that also helps because the surface world sometimes has a very different vibe than what's directly below it. So Castle Brackenwald is from Dolmenwood, and that's right here. Now, I really included it because in my game, I'm going to be putting the Well of Frogs in Castle Brackenwald. And so, if you guys know the Well of Frogs, it's a great adventure. I've reviewed it a couple times in different videos. I've talked about it a couple times. There's a map. Let's see if I can get to it. Where is it? There it is. You have to turn your head to the side. But it connects to the under tunnels of the world. And so, you go down and below the city, and there's a dungeon here, and there's lots of stuff going on, but then there's also connection points. So you could use this as a connection into the deeper Underdark. But it's in the surface. It's in the very, very close to the surface part of the Underdark. But then if you go just a little bit to the west and east, you'll see that there's a very different, well, when we go through them, they're very different types of adventures. Although, the Well of Frogs does connect very well to this whole region down here, which is all about frogs and toads and mushrooms and things. And so it's actually a very good connection to that, which is why I liked it there. So you can easily get into this sort of network, which is all about that. But that's not always the case. Sometimes what's up on the surface is very different than what's down below, and I didn't want to make those connections. So the depth allows you to kind of, really distance things, because, this whole section is really far below Dolmenwood, so it's not actually connected. And really Dolmenwood is right in here. It's basically from this over to here, and so it's in this region. So there's actually nothing there on my map, which means you could add whatever you want below Dolmenwood. If you have a whole idea for what should be below Dolmenwood, nothing, well then there's nothing there. But if you have your whole idea of like what you think the Underdark underneath Dolmenwood would look like, well, you can add it in here. I imagine it would be very mushroom focused, and maybe some dark fey creatures, quicklings or something like that. I don't know, that's kind of how I picture it. But you can do what you want with that. Okay, so I'm really quickly just going to go around the map and show you guys the connection points to the surface, and then I'll go through the adventures that I put specifically down here. Because as you can see, there are some points of connection to the surface. There's the Gates of Firestorm Peak, and there's Castle Brackenwald. There's also Barrow Maze. Over here, Barrow Maze is a connection to the surface. Now, there's no, as far as I know, there's no actual connection to the Underdark in the Barrow Maze, but it's so big it would be easy to add a tunnel, right? Or a couple tunnels that connect to the Underdark. And I thought it would be cool if it connected in that path to the Secret Shrine of Zorgon, and then that connects to the rest of the Underdark. Because the Secret Shrine of Zorgon is sort of just on the overworld map of Barrow Maze, but it doesn't go anywhere. And there's no detail there. But I thought that would be a cool other path into the Barrow Maze if the players discovered it and sort of to go that way. So I always thought it's connected in my mind, and so I wanted to connect it here. So that's connected. Now, obviously, again, you could add in Helix or Ironguard Mont and connect it through like under tunnels or something like that. It's easy to add to this. There's a lot of space, and it's fairly, all you do is put a little point and, Oh, as I should note, these black lines are kind of like major tunnels. They're not like roads, I don't think. You could make them roads, but they're just connection points between these locations, really, is the way to think about it. You could add your own. I'm certain that there's a lot more, way more tunnels than these in the Underdark, but these are like primary tunnels that are not blocked, that you can make it through from one to the other in whatever condition. Sometimes it's more road-like, sometimes it's more natural. There could be twisting and turning, going vertically, just down. It's not just obviously on a horizontal flat plane. So, but that's sort of the idea here. Okay, well that's what I had up here with the Secret Shrine of Zorgon. Now that also connects, as you can see, to the Incandescent Grottos and Hole in the Oak. Those are both on the surface, and it connects to them here. Once again, you could do what you want with that. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I thought it makes sense for them to be connected in the Underdark. I think they are connected through a river tunnel, and I think they're much closer than I've put them here. Again, you could easily just bring Incandescent Grottos right next to it. And say that they're very close. That wouldn't be too difficult to do. Now you'll notice the only blank one I have on the map is this one, which is actually exactly the same as this place here. And again, it all matches up. The actual hexes work out so that things are properly spaced. So if you look, Barrow Maze is exactly spaced from the Incandescent Grottos properly. It's the same distance. Same with these. It's all the same. But this blank square I still didn't have a name for. But I think, whatever it is, it has tunnels that connect down into the Underdark. And it's an important connection point because it's really one of the only ways to get from this stuff over through the Sunless Citadel and then over to this Wharf Road, which I'll talk about later. Okay, so anyway, we have the Hole in the Oak, Incandescent Grottos, and then Sunless Citadel, which I talked about before. I love that one. And this one is another one that has an explicit connection point to the Underdark in it. It's how the kobolds arrived in the Sunless Citadel. There are passages that lead down that way. You could easily just connect it then. So it really is built into the adventure that it connects to the Underdark. So that's great. You have it right there. And then I have In Search of the Unknown, which is the Caves of Quasqueton. I always say Quasqueton. Quasqueton. And that makes sense as well with, again, the Underdark. It would be easy to add maps or tunnels that connect to the Underdark as a whole down here. Okay, a couple other things that I wanted to cover that are connection points to the surface. We have Peacock Point Lighthouse and the Radiant City in Endon. Peacock Point Lighthouse, of course, comes from Wyvern Songs. It's the sinister secret of Peacock Point. And once again, in this adventure, there is an explicit connection to the Underdark. it opens. There's a room that opens up into the Underdark and to the Undertunnels, and it talks a little bit about what might be down there. And so again, you have a connection point down there. And then the same thing with Rainy City and Endon, which you have. Rainy City comes from a Puppet Hand's Guide, or that's one of the books. It's the Lesser Key of Sandiston. And then you have Endon from Magical Industrial Revolution, and it makes sense that that city is going to have connections down into the Underdark. There's going to be sewers below the city. There's going to be a network of tunnels. It's going to go down there. So I think that makes a lot of sense to me, Rainy City. And I like the fact that it connects to all these things. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that there's these sort of water tunnels, and I don't know whether that means they're flooded or it means they're tunnels below the surface of water, and so they're accessible, and there's like ocean above you. I don't know how that works exactly. And also there's different depths of water. I again don't know how that works. I just thought it looked good, and it was a way of indicating where there are tunnels and where there might not be, although this one kind of goes through the slightly deeper. But that's up to you. How you wanna you could just say that this isn't here. But I think it makes sense that it should be, that there is some sort of like either flooded tunnel or very difficult tunnel that is half flooded at times, or I don't know how that works, but I think it would be cool because this is only one of 3 access points from west to east. The other being this one here, and I'll talk about that in a bit, and then the last one being the one at the top by Gates of Firestorm Peak. This doesn't actually connect. Now, obviously, you could make anything connect. You could have many lesser tunnels, and I imagine that there are lots and lots of lesser tunnels that connect, but they're maybe temporary, or maybe they're not on any major quote-unquote maps of the Underdark. Maybe people don't know about them, but maybe really, really secret people might know about them. So these are the 3 main ones that people who know the Underdark maybe know, or something like that. But anyway, that's the Rainy City and Endon. And then I had, Puppet Hand's Guide. And then we had Stonepick Crossing, which is, again, the one at the surface. It's a dam. Now, I noticed something. This is going to be really silly to most people, you guys, if you probably noticed it, but I put the city on the wrong side of the dam, right? Dams... The lake is on the side of the dam that is being dammed, not the far side, and the river is going northeast to southwest if you go back to the surface map. So I put the city on the wrong side. You guys could easily change that. That's just a matter of where the lake is relative to the city, because the water is definitely not rushing up from the ocean. So anyway, that was just a mistake on my end. I didn't even think about that until well after. Regardless, Stonepick Crossing is a great adventure, and it's like a dwarven dam, I think it's an old dwarven city. Dwarven dam built here, and there's like a town built on it, and I sort of imagined it as the regional setting on the top, but it makes sense because as you go down through the dam, there's tunnels and caves and dwarven dwellings and things like that, and so it makes sense that it's connected to the Underdark down there. Now, one thing I probably should have done is connected it over here, but maybe there's a collapsed tunnel or something like that. That would make sense to me, because maybe through the Gorge Caverns actually. Maybe that's an access point, but we'll talk about that later. So then I had 2 more. This is a couple more: Nekemte and Gunderholfen. Darkness at Nekemte and Gunderholfen, which are both connections to the Underdark. Gunderholfen has a big mega dungeon, so it's going to have access to the Underdark as well, and so it makes sense they're connected there and also connect to the broader Underdark. Then I have in Shadow of Tower Silveraxe, which is where Zeroken Ruins and Torthen's Tomb come from. They're both on the surface, but they also, in my mind, and you could easily add them, connect to the Underdark here, and so it's 2 little connection points as well. You'll notice that this is all, again, in the surface area, or near the surface, so it's not very deep, and it connects all the way to Breckerwald, which is coming up. One last thing I have here is the Old Mines. That comes from the Evils of Ilmire. It makes sense, again, that the old mines would have a tunnel down into the Underdark, but that's the only connection from Ilmire to the Underdark. You could add way more, obviously, but that's the one I found. Then you have Against the Cult of the Reptile God. That's where the Dungeon of the Reptile God comes from. Again, it wouldn't be too hard to add a tunnel that connects to these, and then that would connect to the overall region, as well as, again, connecting up to Breckerwald, which is the Yellow Book of Breckerwald. Again, I'm running through these ones much more quickly because I've already gone through them in a video. I don't want to spend too much time on them. And then finally, I have the Keep on the Borderlands, which is obviously where the Caves of Chaos comes from, and the Borderland Keep. And I thought it would be kind of cool if there is a tunnel in the Borderland Keep down into the Underdark. That would be really cool. And so you could actually get to the Caves of Chaos that way. Maybe there's some connection there. Actually, that'd be really cool, like, backstory. But anyway, leaving that aside. Finally, I have the Horrendous Hounds of Hindenburg, and that's where the infested silver mine comes from. It's a connection from the surface down into the deep. Okay, so that is those are the connection points on the surface. Now I'm going to go back sort of in clockwise. That was counterclockwise. I'm going to go clockwise through all of the new things I added for the Underdark specifically. And the first one I want to start with here is Trillemma Adventures. So I added quite a few adventures from Trillemma Adventures. If you've never seen this, you really should check it out. It's really, really cool. It's a whole bunch of locations with sort of statless dungeons and adventure sites and things like that. And I think you can find a review of it on Questing Beast. In fact, I know you can. I would check it out. There's a whole bunch. I mean, just tons and tons of these adventures. And they're really cool looking. They've got really cool isometric maps for the most part, great descriptions, and obviously you could just plunder this and add them in. But I took a handful that I thought worked pretty well. The first one is the Steeps of the Ermenig. Ermenig? I don't know how to say it, but anyway, it's this sort of cave complex down here. It's got a sorcerer and a hermit and all this stuff, so I put it way out here. So I don't know exactly why it's necessarily out there, but that's where it is. There was a lake down here. It's all dry, and then there's all these stuff going on. So anyway, I like it. I think it's a cool place. It's also connected to the Carrig, and the Carrig are a deep kind of clay humanoid thing. They live deep down in the earth, and so it makes sense there is some connection to the Ermenig and the city of the Carrig, which is another one of these Trillemma Adventures in a second here. So then I did the Cage of Serpent, which is it's over here. Boom. I'll come back to that. But the idea here is that there's this restless wizard who's being imprisoned, and there are a paladin order that is guarding him. And so it's kind of interesting that it's over here by the secret shrine of Zorgon at Barrow Maze. Maybe that's connection. Maybe he's a wizard of I forget what the cultists are in Barrow Maze. Set. I think there's cultists for Set, and there's cultists for he's the Warhammer god too, whatever his name is. The one that is all about corruption. He's over there. Anyway, so yeah, that would be an interesting connection point. So I did the Cage of Serpent, which is a really cool adventure. And again, I love these maps. If you guys haven't checked them out, there's great art and great maps there. And it's a cool, interesting location. I like it a lot. And then, though Flesh Be Vast, this is the Gorge Caverns, which are down here. I already mentioned those. Sort of connects to... anyway, there's steps that lead down to a deeper place, and so you could add that in. It's not on the map anywhere, but you could easily do that. And then I did a couple more. Let's see, a Clutch of Shadows, which I might have already passed. Anyway, I used a handful of these. A Clutch of Shadows here. I like this one a lot, and this one does directly connect to one below it, which is the Silent Temple. That's the Fane of the Sun. So there's this old location here, which is kind of conquered or taken over, and it was once a Dradkin temple, and it's no longer active or something like that. And there are still people here, but again, you could change it as you wanted. I just think it's a cool location to put on the map. Really is why I did it. And then finally, I did the City of the Carrig, and where is that? And I really like the City of the Carrig because it's like this very deep. So I can get to it. Did I already pass it? I might have already passed it. Nope, there it is, City of the Carrig. It's this really interesting, very different sort of city, of location. And so you put it down there. There's a huge underworld sea, and there's a further sea below it. There's unbreathable air, and this is built right above the place of totally unbreathable air. And there's just tons of cool ideas there. And so I think the City of the Carrig, it's a cool, otherworldly, almost alien place, and it's really deep. So to get there, you'd have to go, way out of your way through this adventure, go all the way down, past all these tunnels, go through these places. It would be the end of a very long set of adventures, and then, of course, there'd be more locations there to adventure. So I like the fact that it's very far and very deep, and it makes sense because of the kind of location it is. And then finally, I have Midden of the Deep, which is a huge, petrified dung heap, a fossilized dung heap that was from this dragon nest, and now they're all gone, but there's still this massive petrified thing, and you can go down there and people are digging it out, and it's calcified, and there's scavengers and all these things. It's a cool idea, and you'd make sense from the Carrig that they would come from that place. And again, there's opportunities for lots of other connections. There's another lost city down here, and we'll talk about that later. Actually, we'll talk about that pretty quick. But first, I want to go through this sequence here, which is the pod caverns. This is the Shadow Vein set. So this is the Shadow Vein. I'm imagining in my mind this is the Shadow Vein. And it goes all the way down. I really like the Shadow Vein set. I've reviewed them before. And so you have them all here. You have lots of locations that connect from that. It's very, very similar to, as we'll see later, the classic adventure that, whatever it's called, the one that's in between the Giants and the Vault of the Drow, that whole set. It's very similar. It's heavily inspired by that. And so it has the same sort of map. Not the pod caverns, but the Shadow Veins has the same sort of map. You can see it looks very similar if you remember. Well, actually, I'll go through it later because it's one of the ones I included. But you see there's a whole bunch of adventure locations and then a whole bunch of extra locations that are not detailed, but like are hubs, and there's a lot of secondary and tertiary tunnels. And so I've only included the primary tunnels mostly on here, but you could easily add in the secondary tunnels, and that'd be kind of cool. You can see the depth of it and how far they are and all of these things. So anyway, I really like this section. You've got a whole bunch of really cool locations. You've got some bugbears and goblins, but you've got some other stuff too, like the Caves of Insanity and the Snide Dungeon of the Mad Mage Halleck. This all culminates in the Caverns of the Pod God, or the Cavern of the Pod God, and then the Green Death Isle, which is from mouth of the Shadow Vein, which leads you down to this location here, these last locations here. Now, what's interesting about this is that it starts with this pod cavern of the sinister shrooms. And there's this idea that the mushrooms are causing trouble, they're infesting things, there's a plot, and it connects all the way to the Caverns of the Pod God, all this stuff. But this next set of adventures, which is something that I'm going to review on my channel at some point, Demon Spore, The Secret of the Shrooms, is a great set of adventures. It's by Matthew Finch. It's by Swords and Wizardry. And it's all about this plot by a mushroom cult, basically, shroom cult. And so I think it fits perfectly. It fits perfectly with what came before, in terms of its tone, in terms of like what's actually going on and the people there. So I like this connection here, where you follow the river further, and it connects to these guys here. Now, these are both great adventures. I'm going to review them in detail. They're old school, and so they don't have like maps on every page. It's not hyperlinked, anything like that. I'll talk about that later. But the adventures themselves are awesome, and what's actually going on there. Tons of good roleplay opportunities, tons of good monsters to fight, tons of good treasure. It's fun. Now it connects, as I already said, it connects up to Castle Brackenwald through this longer tunnel, which connects to the Throne of the Toad King. And that makes perfect sense because, again, the Well of Frogs, you could have this whole frog connection there. And so I actually think it works out really well. You've got the shroom influence through here down to the shroom of the stone cyst of the Shroom Priest, which is the second half of this adventure. And then you've got the frog influence from the Throne of the Toad King all the way up to the Castle Brackenwald. So it would be cool to do that. Well of Frogs, some quest leads you down here. You maybe hear of or interact with the Throne of the Toad King, and then later on, you're heading up to Castle Brackenwald. And if you go back to the surface really quickly, you'll see that there's this other blank map here. Well, it turns out that that's exactly over top the pod caverns of the Sinister Shrooms, and that adventure starts with people going missing. So you could be back in Castle Brackenwald, hear that quest, come down here to this other location, and find the entrance to the Caverns of the Sinister Shrooms, go down, and you end up taking the river, and then you end up all the way down here at the Throne of the Toad King, and then you realize where you are, and you finish it up with the Stone Cyst of the Shroom Priest, and that could be an entire quest or campaign for many, many months. I think that whole adventure set right there. So it's a great combination. Anyway, I think that's cool. So I was really proud of that. I really liked that connection. I shouldn't say proud. I'm glad that I caught that and put those together and made them where they are. I think it's cool. Now, if you go back over here briefly, you'll see there's this Lost City of Quatot. That comes from Chanters in the Dark, which is sort of an interesting adventure. And it starts, well, actually, this already begins in the Cavern of the Pod God, but it starts this sequence of semi-science fiction-y adventures that you're going to find. And the Underdark very often has a lot of science fiction-y stuff. Science fantasy, maybe is a better way of putting it. You see that certainly with the Illithid. There's often connections with spaceships and planar travel and aliens and stuff like that, right? I think even the Vault of the Drow or the Demon Web pits, I think it ends with sort of a quasi-spaceship, like Lolth spaceship, kind of, I think. So there's already kind of this, science fantasy vibe to the Underdark. But I think you certainly get that in this one, where there's like a meteor and a crashed city and all this stuff. So anyway, I really like it. I like that tone. I know a lot of people don't. The nice thing about it, just like the surface map, if you don't like a thing, you just leave it out, and you don't have to worry about it. Or you can explain it otherwise, just through magic or something like that. So that's this thing here. The same thing also, and this one's going to be a little bit odd, is the Sky Tower of Belxos. Now, this is a sky tower. It's a flying tower in the mountains that's actually a spaceship. But I think it'd be really cool, and this is why I put it there. It would be really cool if it's floating over a huge abyss in the Underdark. And it is a spaceship, but it's like, crashed and sealed itself under the surface ages ago. And so you can just do the same exact thing. Now, this adventure has like rules for traveling through the mountains and mountain trek, but just make that Underdark trek, right? I mean, you're coming from the Borderland Keep or something like that. Maybe you're coming all the way from Brackenwald all the way down. Regardless, here it is as an interesting adventure, and I think it works in the Underdark. Now, that's one thing, right? You can take, and this is sort of the demonstration of it, you can take almost any adventure and set it in the Underdark, right? Because almost every dungeon has accessible location, or is an accessible location that requires you to walk to it, and then you go into it, and if it's a tunnel, or if it's a cave, or if it's a dungeon, or if it's a pit, whatever, you just put it in the Underdark. So really, I could have filled this, right? I could have filled this with just lots of adventures and been like, oh, I put this in the Underdark, like this one. But I think this will serve as a demonstration. There are a handful, and you can just add your own, right? That's the idea, is take almost any adventure, you can put it in the Underdark fairly easily. In fact, sometimes no work is required. The next one I added was Tomb of the Serpent Kings, and I added that down here next to the Dungeon of the Reptile God. So there's some connection there. Reptile God, Serpent Kings, maybe that's where he came from. Maybe it's an old relic of that time. Now you'll notice this is basically the only new thing I added down here. Everything else is connections to the surface. And again, that's just because I didn't have all that many Underdark adventures. I could have put more in down here. I probably should have. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to add your own dungeons in around here. A lot of stuff can happen down here. But the Tomb of the Serpent Kings it needs no explanation, or introduction, I should say. Everyone knows about it. You guys should go download it. It's free in the PDF version. So I would say go check it out. It's a great introductory adventure. Over here, I added Into the Lithoplex. Now, this is another one of those ones that's technically on the surface, but then it has this deeper ruined city below, and I actually really liked that over here. So the surface, quote unquote, is just the layer of the Underdark in which you find it, right? And then you go down below that into the deeper dark for the Citadel, the Chasm, and the Buried Temple. So just think of the surface here as the level of the Underdark in which you first find it. But it's also cool because there's not a lot going on around here. Like there's Gunderholfen, and then there's this long and probably buried tunnel to go over here, and you can get up to Stone Pit Crossing this way. But there's just a lot of empty space, and so this is kind of pretty far from everywhere. So having an old city that's down here, I think it's a cool idea. And having people who live there and are trying to figure out what to do about it and all these things. And there's it technically, the place technically warps and shifts location, so that would actually be cool if the Lithoplex changes, and maybe you could put it at different places, right? So the city actually pops up in different parts of the Underdark from time to time. I think that would be really cool. So anyway, it's the shifting city, right? And it moves between locations in the Underdark. This is where I put it for now. So I really like this one. Again, I've reviewed it before. You can go check out that review. It's a great one. The other one that I put around here was Ankeg, which is another one. It's like Alien, but it also makes sense that it's sort of near Stone Pit Crossing. So people have gone to this mine, which is, it's mining some valuable material, and they've gotten destroyed, right? Anyway, so there's some connection points between these two locations. So you have a place that, if you wanted to start there, would have some Underdark adventures nearby. The same thing with the Twisting Cave of the Pale Ones. That comes from it's one of the 5 short adventures that you can get on the Arcane Library website. It's right there. So it connects to them all. Now, the next adventure I put is something maybe a little controversial. Not really because of the content, but just because of what you'd have to leave out. And that's Deep Carbon Observatory. I put that down here in the corner. Now, Deep Carbon Observatory obviously has a surface adventure. By the way, this is the one that has, this is the pay what you want version on DTRPG. There's a new updated one that costs money, but this is the old one. But you could use either, I suppose. I haven't looked at the new one yet. But Deep Carbon Observatory, again, obviously has like a surface adventure. There's the flooded valley. There's the, the surface you want to dig down through. So there's a lot of stuff that you'd lose if you just put this dungeon here. But you could still do that, right? You could still add that up on the surface. If you look at the map here, there's not a lot going on down there, right? In fact, there's nothing going on down there. So you could easily make this valley, the Deep Carbon Observatory Valley, right? So there's a road that comes off from Longfelt or near Netherite and goes up through the hills here, and this is the flooded valley, and you have to come. So you could easily add that in, right? And then you just go straight down to the Deep Carbon Observatory. So it wouldn't be the end of the world to add that to the surface, and then you have it here. So I thought that was fine. It was in a part of the world that didn't really have anything. And now Deep Carbon Observatory has massive implications if you include it in your world. A lot of these adventures do, right? But Deep Carbon Observatory really does. So if you want to include it, then be sure that you know what you're doing. But I think it's really cool as a location, so I wanted to include it down there. Down in the Underdark. So anyway, yeah, that's why I included that. Now, if you come up north here, you have the Pit of Vanswink, which comes from Perilous Deeps. Now, this is another one of those ones that's basically just a surface location that I put down into the abyss. It's down through page 24, I think. Getting there. There's a whole bunch of locations, by the way, in here that you could add into almost any campaign. But here it is, the Pit of Vanswink. Now, again, there's a pit on the surface that has kind of like a mine attached to it, and there's all these overgrown and rusted. You can just put that, again, in the surface level of the dungeon, and I think that's what I would do. So it's pretty close to Stone Pit Crossing. It's a cool location, and it goes down to lots of creatures. There are these Cyclops skeletons, which actually connects to the Shadow Tower Silver Axe, I think. So that would actually be an interesting connection point there. But anyway, there's this cool, it's a really cool adventure. I like it. And I think you could, I saw it, I really wanted to include it. Again, it's technically a surface adventure, but you can just do that with any of these adventures, put them down into the Underdark. And this one makes a lot of sense down in the Underdark because it is a mine and there's stuff going on down there. Okay, so that's that one. If you come a little bit left, you have a few more adventures. Here's the Caverns of Sacred, the Caverns of the Sacred Fire. I've reviewed this one as well. This is by Francisco Lemos. It's a cool little delve. Once again, the only thing that's on the surface is the entrance. So you just put that as a ruined statue, a ruined sculpture, right? And then you have this cult that's kind of, or was operating down below. And it's all underground anyway, so just do that here. I think that would work just fine. It's a cool adventure, and again, I've reviewed it, so you can check that out. Now, this one is also one that's pretty weird, the Positronic Library. I wanted to include it, although it really is super science fiction-y. And it doesn't, I don't know, it sort of would be very strange to put it in here. You might not want it. I totally understand that if you just wanted to cut it out, you wouldn't have to put the Positronic, all right, there's just no cavern here, or there's some other dungeon at the end of it, or whatever it might be. I like the Positronic Library as an adventure, but it's super science fiction-y. So, keep that in mind, or science fantasy-y. So you want to keep that one in mind. But I do like it. I've reviewed this one before. Next is Khazad Mor. This is an old Dwarven city, an old Dwarven forge. I've reviewed this one before as well. It's basically underground anyway, right? I mean, this is sort of the surface, but it doesn't have to be the surface. It could be an old Dwarven fortress, and it definitely connects to the Underdark in many locations. Now, I have it as a dead end here. It probably shouldn't be a dead end. It probably should connect, in my mind, it should connect to this part up here. But you don't have to do that. That would be kind of cool, actually, if Khazad Mor connected there. That way you could either go through the West Gate or Khazad Mor to get into this, which you'll see later, which is actually, right away, the Great Dwarf Road, which I love the Great Dwarf Road. I'm actually running an adventure campaign right now, set in it. But going back to Khazad Mor for a moment, again, I've reviewed this adventure before. It's really good. I like Khazad Mor a lot. The coloring is odd, right? But the actual adventure itself, I've talked about this before, is great. It's kind of punky, but leaving that aside, I'm never really a big fan of the punky look. But you can always get the print-friendly version, and it's just black and white. And that looks great. And the adventure itself is awesome. And it combines really well with the Great Dwarf Road, so I like that they're nearby, one to the other. But I think I should have connected them here. That would be easy to add, though, even in paint. You just add a little black line connecting them. But the Great Dwarf Road, again, by Simon Carrier, that's something I reviewed before. Really, really cool. It's got a whole bunch of locations along this road. Now, it's north-south, I just made it west-east because it made a lot more sense there, and it's one of the few connection points, again, between west and east. So if you have to cross in the Underdark from one side to the other, this is where you'd have to go. You'd have to take the Great Dwarf Road. And it's a dangerous path. There's a lot of stuff going on there, a lot of cool locations, but also some ways to skip things. You've got the tombs over here, the caves up and down here, and you've got the mines which connect this. So there's several ways to skip not quite anything. You have to come through the west gate, you have to leave through the east gate, but otherwise. Now, it says throughout that there are locations that actually come out onto the mountain surface. And if you look out above, basically like this, somewhere right around here is Summer's End. You could make this more hilly, rocky, and like these are locations that come out of the ground here. You could easily do that. And if you look at the map here, it's kind of coming out over here in the middle of the mire. That could be kind of cool. There's sort of like rocky hillocks or something, you know, out in the mire somewhere, in the moor. And these, like, for example, the spire, the griffin spire might come out of one really high out of the earth. That'd be kind of cool. So there's just this like spire in the middle of the moor, and you can't really climb it because, I mean, you could, but it's really, really high and there's no obvious handholds, but it actually leads all the way down to the Great Dwarf Road. That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. In fact, I should have done that. But you know, this is something you'd have to add into the other map later. But I think that'd be really cool. So anyway, you have this really cool like straight road that cuts off a ton of travel time either way, all the way down or all the way north. So that would be a great thing to add there. This is honestly, I'm running this right now, as I said, as a campaign, and it's super fun. It's got enough choice about your path forward. There's tons of factions in here. With a little bit of work, you can make it all connect, the different parts. I mean, in terms of like factions and people, you know, connections and NPC things and monsters to fight and lots of weird things, cool artifacts to encounter, some pretty game-changing as well. So this is a great campaign, a great adventure set of sites. It's also the sort of thing where you could just use it as a road, because if you don't take any of the off paths and you clear off some of the rubble or some of the blockages, like the broken bridge, for example, if you can find a way across it, then you can just skip tons. And so this really does serve as a road. It doesn't have to be an adventure site. So the players might use it a couple times before they start going into some of the side passages. I think that'd be cool. Now we come to the final couple, basically. And this is Descent into the Depths of the Earth. This is the one I was talking about earlier. And this is this whole sequence of tunnels. Now, this is a classic adventure, and the map, if you can find it, let me get to it, is actually rather confusing. Just because of the scan quality of what I have here. It's kind of hard to follow in terms of the tunnels and what's what. But I think I did a pretty good job of mapping out the primary tunnels. Now, there's some primary tunnels that are not connected. But I do think this works. The major location points, the Drow Checkpoint, the Illithid Spy Post, Caverns and Warrens of the Troglodytes, there's the River Crossing, the Verfneblin Watch Post, the Koatoa Shrine, Drow Gate, the Illusory Garden, the Cavern of Bones, and then the Vault of the Drow itself, which is a city. Basically like Menzoberranzan before Menzoberranzan, basically. It's called something, but I forgot what the city is called. Anyway, so that's a location here, and it connects, obviously, to further Underdark stuff west, or left, and also through this sequence of tunnels connects to whatever this city is, and this here. So there is an access point to the surface relatively close by, which is, I think, quite interesting. So it's not totally isolated, but it is very heavily defended, and you have to go into the deep dark to get to it. So it's actually quite far, vertically. And I think that's kind of cool. And there's not an obvious way, I would imagine, to get through these tunnels. Maybe they're illusorily blocked or something like that, or maybe they are just guarded, or maybe this tunnel's not here if you don't want it to be. But regardless, it does connect over here as well. So this might be another way of getting down to it. And there's lots of tertiary, secondary tunnels, as you can see from this map here. Tons of secondary and tertiary passages throughout. Okay, well, so I really like both Descent into the Deep, into the Depths of the Earth, and the Vault of the Drow, which is this next one, which is the final locations up there. But this is not the final adventure that I added here. The final one that I added is this whole sequence here, and that is Night Below, which has a great Underdark section. Now, the surface is the Garlstone Mine. That's the connection from the surface. Now, if you go here, you have this sort of section up here, which is St. Larme, Dread Falls, Waldham, and Wyvernsford, which is a perfect actual sequence for the surface in the very first of these Evils of Harenshire. Now, it's not quite right, but it's actually, there's a bunch of towns along this river. There's a larger town of Thurmaster. I think Thurmaster's the larger town. Palfrey's Creek Keep might be the largest town. But anyway, you've got that basically down here, Romage, Ironguard, Mott, Wyvernsford. And then you've got these Waltham, Dreadfalls, and St. Larme. You've got the New Mire. You've got places for that here. You've got the Eelhold. Maybe that's what this lake is. You've got some woods. You've got a mountain up here. I don't know. It works really, really well. These could be the half-cut hills if you want, or these could be whatever you want to know. Like, you could easily make this section Night Below. And you could have the Garlstone Mine right there. That's kind of what I did, is I just had the Garlstone Mine up here somewhere. It's actually, if you look at it on the map, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. The Garlstone Mine would be right up here west of St. Larme, north of Dreadfalls, which is perfect, right? I think it's perfect. And so then that connects all the way down here. So you got the Evils of Ilmire, which is a great adventure. It's the Evils of Harenshire, excuse me, not Ilmire. Ilmire's a good one too, but the Evils of Harenshire, this first book, is actually a great adventure. It's a very good introduction. I've run through it once, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of intrigue. There's some good back and forth. I think Matt Colville very famously has a whole campaign built in and around Night Below, and so he's talked about these locations and the way he's adapted it, and you can watch that sequence. But Perils of the Underdark, which is the second section, is awesome for the map of the Underdark, and you can see that's what's going on here. You've got this Verf Neblin city maze, you've got Troll Caves, you've got the Burial Grounds, Grell Nest, Caverns of the Reptiles, the Hall of the Rockseer Elves, and then a whole bunch of locations leading all the way down to the City of the Glass Pool, and then finally to the Sunless Sea. That's the final location here, and there's got a whole bunch of different options. This is why it's kind of packed out. There's a lot of different locations down here. Maybe it's a little too packed. I didn't need to include all of these, but anyway, they're all there. So this is because it leads to the final Aboleth, right? This is the Aboleth, kind of. That's the big bad down here. You can kind of see in the background. Illithids, Aboleth, Darrow, Dwergar, and all that. It's a great adventure. It's a great sequence, and this would be another great campaign here. What I like about it, too, is that, again, the City of the Glass Pool connects pretty easily through these tunnels to the gates of Firestorm Peak. Which means that, again, as a trading hub, there's some Illithid there. For example, there's Darrow and Dwergar. It's a Dwergar city, but there's Illithid and Darrow there. That makes sense. They connect down here pretty easily. And then also there's the City of Carrig, which could connect that way. And then there's the people from Castle Brackenwald, because there's humans there as well, and they could make this trip north. And so it really is a hub for various locations. I thought it actually kind of works out, so it comes all the way around, full circle. Now, if you are planning on running an Underdark campaign or using this map, I highly recommend 4 books. 4, is that right? 4? Yeah, 4. First of all, Gary's Appendix issue 7 has an entire section on how to do Underdark adventures. Like, it has tactics for cave encounters, mapping, squeezing, and flooding, how to describe caves, fungi for the fungi, undermarches, open world generation, avoiding minor troubles, gemstones, and drop tables for abandoned mines. So great, as well as a minor bestiary of 3 creatures. But you have a great tools for running Underdark things, caves and things like that. Then, of course, Veins of the Earth, which highly recommend. The sort of creatures and ideas, the cultures of the deep, the ideas for exploration, climbing, and travel, light and dark, like generating the veins, extra spaces, madness and change. Like, this is a must-have if you're going to run Underdark, in my opinion. It's really cool. I had 5, actually, not 4. 2 of them are just extra fungi, which is always good for the Underdark, right? You always want fungi. Fungi of the Far Realms and fungi of the Urwald Forest. Both great books, supplementary for extra crazy cool fungus to have down there. And then finally, the Moria book by the One Ring. Not because I think you're going to use actually Moria, but because of the ideas here and the locations here can easily be adapted to any game, not just Moria. Oh, such good art too. Great inspiration here. So anyway, I recommend you guys check out Moria as well. All right, well, that'll do it. As you guys can see, as a whole, I'm really happy with this. It's obviously not as fleshed out. There's basically like 4 distinct zones. There's this region down here, there's this region up here, there's this region right here, and then there's this region right here. So basically 4 distinct adventure sites with a whole lot of extra additional space for more adventures to be added. But that would be very easy to do. Anyway, I'm going to put links below to where you can get all of these adventures, and then I'll put also a link to the Dropbox with all the files both in Worldographer and some of the completed ones so that you guys can use them if you'd like. Anyway, hope this has been interesting to everybody, and I'll see you all in another video.